folks will say like, oh, I didn't hate my fat self, or I don't think fat people are bad, and then post weight loss content that's just like, oh, I had to like get rid of the old me. A lot of y'all are reckless as hell.
Hello YouTube, and welcome to the Body Honesty Project. My name is Lydia, and today we are talking about reckless behavior and the locus of control. You see, these fat talkers seem to think that posting before and after pictures is reckless because it hurts their fat feelings. But I think it's because they have an external locus of control rather than an internal one, meaning that they get their beliefs, self-confidence, and self-worth externally rather than internally. But before we get into the TikTok, I think we need to learn a little bit more about the locus of control. So why don't we watch this next clip, then come back and discuss. Meet Greg and Joe. Greg has an internal locus of control, and Joe has an external locus of control. Greg believes that he controls his destiny. He has the power to work, study, exercise, and determine his own fate. Joe believes that society and environment control his destiny. He thinks that other people's treatment of him, his genetics, and social media controls his fate. At school, Greg and Joe both have an exam to write. Greg studies hard because he believes that his effort is a direct contributor to the grade he gets on the test. He is personally responsible for the results. Joe, on the other hand, believes that his grade will largely be determined by the teacher's mood and feelings towards him, so he thinks that it's pointless to study. He believes that he will be marked based on what the teacher thinks of him. At work, Greg and Joe are both being considered for a promotion. Greg puts in his best effort every day. He is on time, does all his tasks efficiently, and shows how reliable of a resource he is. Whereas Joe thinks that their boss is going to promote whoever he likes best anyways, and doesn't put in any extra effort. At the doctor, Greg and Joe are both diagnosed as pre-diabetic. Greg listens to the doctor and makes modifications to his lifestyle. He eats more nutritionally dense foods, stays away from overly processed foods, and gets his exercise in. Joe believes that diabetes is largely genetic and doesn't make any changes since it will likely get him anyways. Because Greg believes that he has more control over his life than Joe, he lives a little more cautiously. He keeps repercussions in mind when he makes choices. He is aware of consequences. Joe, on the other hand, lives his life more recklessly. He doesn't believe that his actions affect his life and would rather live in the moment than be constrained by life rules. Since Joe doesn't take responsibility for himself, in order to feel good about himself, he needs other people to buy into his doctrine. The more people that believe him, the more people prop him up. And the more people that prop him up, the more power he has. Greg, on the other hand, doesn't need others to prop him up because he props himself up. What other people believe or do to themselves has no impact on him. Reckless behavior is behaving in a way that doesn't factor in the consequences of actions. It puts yourself at harm and potentially other people at harm. Joe is exhibiting reckless behavior to himself by not doing any self-care. But he's also doing reckless actions to others by promoting other people to also not do any self-care. Since Joe has an external locus of control, he desperately needs others to validate him. And when people cease to validate him, he loses his sense of self. Greg, on the other hand, doesn't need other people to validate him because he is already firm in his beliefs. He doesn't care what other people do to or for themselves. It doesn't affect him. Because of Joe's external locus of control, he will be quick to tell Greg that all the work he's putting in at school, work, and health is futile, and that it makes people like Joe look bad for just accepting the way that their life is. He may even say that it's reckless because it makes other people feel bad for not working as hard. But Greg is only concerned with his own life. He isn't making a statement about anybody else. So rather than Joe taking responsibility for himself, he feels the need to draw attention to how Greg's behaviors harm him and those around him in order to feel good about himself and his behaviors. So, I ask you, who's really being reckless here? So, now that we know a little bit more about what reckless behavior is and the locus of control, let's keep that in mind while we watch this TikTok.
Folks will say like, oh, I didn't hate my fat self, or I don't think fat people are bad. And then post weight loss content that's just like, oh, I had to like get rid of the old me. Like, y'all don't realize that you've internalized fat phobia so much that you think of your fat self as a villain that needs to disappear or be rendered invisible. Like, I can understand not liking your body. While that takes a lot of work to understand how it's in part internalized fat phobia and things like that. Insofar as you lose weight because you desire to be smaller, that's influenced by fat phobia. But I really need some of y'all to really reflect before you post stuff and you say that it's not because you hate fat bodies or hate fat people, but talk about your fatness as something that needed to disappear and how your life is so much better without it and how now you have self-control. Y'all don't see the irony in those statements. You don't see how you're perpetuating fat phobia and the myths that people are fat because they don't know how to control themselves, or that fat people are bad and deserve to be villains. Do better. A lot of y'all are reckless. Reckless as hell. There's a difference between weightlifting because you want to be strong and you have a goal, right? I can deadlift a lot of weight, but I don't deadlift to reach a goal weight. You see the difference? I'm not trying to make my fat body disappear. My fatness is not a sin that needs to be forgiven and forgotten. Please do better.
Now, I hear a lot of self-pitying and crying for validation in this one, but let's break down the arguments one by one. Let's start at the beginning.
Folks will say like, oh, I didn't hate my fat self, or I don't think fat people are bad. And then post weight loss content that's just like, oh, I had to like get rid of the old me.
Why are we against self-improvement? You can love yourself the way that you are and still want to improve. This woman talks about being a deadlifter. And you know what? She's probably been increasing the amount of weight that she can deadlift. So if she could deadlift 100 pounds and now she can deadlift 150 pounds, is that not showing improvement? Does that mean that the old her that could only deadlift 100 pounds was bad? And that now that she can deadlift 150 pounds, she is much better? Well, it does show improvement, but it doesn't show hate for the old her. Why can't we embrace self-improvement? When you have an internal locus of control, you believe that you are in charge. You control your destiny. So someone can completely love themselves as is, but still want to be better. And posting their weight loss pics shows that they had the power and control to improve themselves. You feeling slighted by this shows that you have an external locus of control, meaning that you need other people to feel the same way as you do in order to validate your beliefs. And that's just not fair.
Like, y'all don't realize that you've internalized fat phobia so much that you think of your fat self as a villain that needs to disappear.
Is it really that? Is it really wanting your fat self to disappear that's upsetting you? Or is it more likely that other people are proving that weight loss is within your control, that it's not genetic, and you do not have to live in a fat body if you do not want to? I think that that is what is upsetting you, because you need other people to prop you up, to buy into this whole fat acceptance rhetoric, and that it's not within your control, that it's genetic, and that we should all just be happy being fat. But if some people decide, you know what, I don't want to be fat, that ruins your support network. That makes you fall to the ground because there's nobody else propping you up. And then you have to look internally at yourself and decide, is this right? Are my beliefs right? And without the external support, you start to reflect and feel like, maybe I'm wrong. And that's scary as hell. But if you turn your locus of control internally instead of externally, you will find that if your beliefs are firm and you truly believe them, you don't need other people to validate them. The fact that you do need validation, you show to me that your locus of control is completely external. Because if you believe that your happiness comes from within, what other people do and say about themselves shouldn't bother you.
Y'all don't see the irony in those statements. You don't see how you're perpetuating fat phobia and the myths that people are fat because they don't know how to control themselves, or that fat people are bad and deserve to be villains.
First of all, it's not a myth. It is not healthy to be overweight or obese. That is not a myth. The fact that you need to think it's a myth exhibits your external locus of control, because you need other people to believe that you're fine and healthy the way that you are. But deep down, you don't think it's true, because if you did think it's true, you wouldn't need the validation from others. You would just believe it. Saying that losing weight is perpetuating the idea that fat people are lazy and lack self-control is really you saying the inside voice out loud, because that is probably what you believe. And trying to brainwash people with health at every size rubbish is damaging. Just because you can't dig yourself out of a hole does not mean you need to drag everyone else into the hole with you. You could do better for yourself, and you know that you could. But rather than taking that on internally and working on self-improvement, you need to poo-poo anybody else that is doing self-improvement for themselves and see that as a personal attack on you when it actually has absolutely nothing to do with you. Get your power from within and stop seeking validation from others.
A lot of y'all are reckless. Reckless as hell.
Oh, the world of trigger warnings we live in. That's why I recently changed mine. When I started this channel, I thought that we had to do them, so I put up a trigger warning. But if you read my more recent one, it's a little more cheeky, because I believe that we are responsible for our own triggers. How on earth is it reckless to talk about yourself and your own self-improvement? I think it's a hell of a lot more reckless to be promoting health at every size and convincing people that their fatness is not hurting them. Who's being reckless here? The person that is guarding their own health, or the person that's telling everybody else to not listen to it?
There's a difference between weightlifting because you want to be strong and you have a goal, right? I can deadlift a lot of weight, but I don't deadlift to reach a goal weight. You see the difference?
Why are your goals any more valid than mine? You can deadlift because you want to get strong, and that's fine. That's your goal. But what if I want to deadlift to get strong and lose weight? Does that make my motivations any less valid? If two people are trying to get a promotion, and one person wants the promotion because it's more money, and the other person wants the promotion because it's more interesting work, does it make the person that wants more money less valid? Less of a person because they want more money? No. We all have our own motivations. Why do you need to be so judgy? You do you. You can tell yourself over and over again that I am deadlifting to be strong and to be fit. And that might be true. But I say might because I feel so much self-hatred and anger from this TikToker. I think that she knows that she could lose weight if she wanted to. It's diet. It's not exercise. It's diet. And she's lifting a lot and she's getting strong, but she's not slimming down because she's overeating on her calories. And do I know her personally? No, but I know math and science, and that has got to be the reason: overconsumption of calories. But that's too hard to look at. That's too hard to admit. So instead, she decides to project that the reason why she does fitness is to get strong, which is fine. You can do fitness to get strong. But why ram your motivations down someone else's throat? Someone else could have the goals to lose weight, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you had an internal locus of control, you wouldn't care what other people's motivations are. Let people be.
Please do better.
And I could say the same thing to you. Please do better. Do you. If you want to work on your fitness, go ahead and work on your fitness with your own motivations. But why do we need to tell other people that their motivations are wrong? We all are unique individuals. We all have our own goals. And the reason why you are so upset that other people are posting before and after pictures or saying that they had to lose weight, because it reminds you of your internal guilt, your internal thoughts of, I could lose weight if I wanted to. I could lose weight if I tried. I could slim down if I cut my calories. But you don't like being reminded of that. That's too hurtful to you. So you decide that instead of looking inward and reflecting on your beliefs and your wants, you want to project your rage outwardly to people that are trying to improve themselves. And that's not fair. We are all individuals with our own motivations. We should not have to justify why we want to do things for ourselves. One of my biggest beefs with fat acceptance is the need to externalize culpability for being fat. Like, it can never be the person's fault. And you know what? In many cases, it was not their fault that they got fat, but it is their responsibility to fix it. If you watched my previous video, I recently found out that I have CPTSD. And that was not my fault. I did not get it because of something I did. I got it because of my upbringing. But it's my responsibility to fix it. It's not my fault that it happened, but nobody can undo it but me. So I'm seeing my doctor, I'm seeing a therapist, I'm on meds, I am trying to get better. It's my responsibility. But these people want to externalize responsibility, which is why I really hate this argument of unpack that, unpack those feelings. So what they want to do is you unpack it and put the blame on everybody else except for yourself. It's everybody else's fault that you're fat. It's everybody else's fault that your health is declining. It's everybody else's fault that you can't fit into an airplane seat. But not for a second do they look internally and look at their culpability, look at their responsibility, look at their accountability. No, that's always off the table. With my brain chemistry, I have every excuse to be an addict, an alcoholic, a gambler, sexually promiscuous. I have all the excuses, but I'm not going to use them because I'm responsible to me to not do those things. I am actually messed up in the head, and I have reasons for why I could do other things, but I'm also responsible enough to know that those things are bad for me. So we can keep on making excuses and blame other people for hurting us, or we can look internally and see how we are hurting ourselves. And it all starts with being honest. So until next time, stay body positive, but also body honest.